And in the interest of sharing the secrets I told you guys I would share, today's secret is how to appear attractive. You guys know, any idea how you can appear attractive? Hang out with ugly people. Have you ever noticed this when you see, I'm assuming you guys like ladies, I don't know, but when I see ladies together, and you see 3 of them together, and 2 of them are very plain. Let's be nice, they're very plain. What does the other one look like by comparison? Good, right? I worked with this woman, and everyone on the shop floor, she was the only woman there. Everyone on the shop floor, they're like, oh yeah, Janice is so hot. And on the shop floor, Janice did look pretty good up against these overweight 45-year-old guys, right? But I met the mall with my wife. That's back when people still went to the mall. I'm at the mall with my wife, and there's Janice. And she has to actually get my attention because I don't recognize her. And then I realized suddenly that Janice is actually quite plain. The only thing that made Janice look good was by comparison. Now, am I really telling you hang out with ugly people? No. I'm telling you everything is relative, right? And we'll talk some more about that on a later secret. Any questions before we jump back into the material? I think we left off on page 21, and we were getting ready to start talking about the factors that determine reject rates. Mr. Bardwash says yes. Okay, first of all, we have the size of the incentive payment per non-defective pair produced. Why is it important to make our incentive based purely on non-defective pairs? What if I say just any pair of shoes you make, you'll get the incentive? What will people do?
They'd make a lot of defective pairs.
Yeah, they're going to half-ass it. You're going to end up with shoes that are missing soles and everything else, but oh, it counts because I got it in the box, right? And so that's why you have to make your payment per non-defective pair produced. And then we have the spending for TQM Six Sigma quality control efforts. Have you guys ever heard of TQM? TQM is total quality management. Back in the 1990s, it was all the buzz phrase, and undoubtedly the authors come from that time period. You hear more these days, or at least 10 years later, you'd hear more about Six Sigma, which is another quality control, quality improvement initiative. And so if we have those efforts, you're going to reduce your number of rejects. The best practices training is also going to help you reduce your defects. The number of models, styles comprising the company's product line. What do you think? Do you think that it'll be easier to make defect-free shoes if we're only making one model or if we're making a bunch? Yeah, if you've only got one. And so this is another one of those trade-offs. So we had the setup and tear down. The more models you have, the worse it is for setup and tear down. And the same is true with defect rates. The more models you have, the bigger the problem is with defects. The use of new equipment as opposed to refurbished equipment, even if that refurbished equipment has recently been purchased. New equipment runs better and causes less scrap. In fact, there were 2 things that we used to justify buying new machines. Number one, as a machine gets older, the maintenance costs go up, up, up. And the other thing is, as a machine gets older, it has looser tolerances, and it may not be able to make the precision of parts that you're used to. And so when a machine gets worn out, it starts throwing bad shoes. And so keeping your newer machines will help you out there. And whether production improvement option A has been installed. We're going to get to these options today, hopefully. But that option reduces the reject rate. Earlier, we had ones that improved worker productivity, and then we had one they talked about that reduced the cost of setups. And so which one's going to be important to you is a matter of your strategy. Studies indicate that it's possible to reduce facility reject rates to 1.5% or less, but it is left for company co-managers to determine what actions to take And how much to spend on driving reject rates down. Just like everything else, there are diminishing returns to this. You could put some effort in and really make a big dent, and then put the same amount of effort in and you're going to get a smaller dent with the next round. And so you need to make, and by the way, these things are not free. They cost money, right? So you're going to have to figure out what to do. One of the things that I learned early on was the definition of quality where I worked, and it was the fit for purpose definition of quality. What does that mean? Does the thing function as designed? Does it do what it's supposed to do? Now, with shoes, can you just say fit for purpose? No, because there are aesthetic appeals. There's the ugly colors, and then there's like gobs of glue that might not impact the performance of the shoe, but certainly would impact the aesthetics of the shoe. So we got a little bit more going on here than fit for purpose definition of quality, but we can say that the quality is in the eye of the beholders, and that they're probably not willing to pay twice as much to get a shoe that has just the tiniest less amount of flaw. Okay, deciding how many pairs to produce at each facility. The final entries on the branded production page concern how many pairs of branded footwear to produce at each facility. There's a line on the page showing the approximate number of branded pairs that will need to be produced to satisfy buyer demand. But the first time you visit this page, it's only a first approximation because it's based on prior level years of competitive effort exerted by your company and rival companies. However, the forecast of the approximate number of pairs that need to be produced is updated each time. Number one, you make adjustments to your company's prices. What happens to that number if you lower your company's prices? Your forecasted demand will be higher. Your advertising, if you increase your spending on advertising, your forecasted demand should be higher. By the way, if it isn't, then there's no use in advertising, right? Because that's the whole purpose of advertising. And other levels of competitive effort, so that's the SKU number of the, all that kind of stuff. So anytime you change those things, your sales forecast is going to change. Number two, you make changes in the assumed levels of competitive efforts of rivals, whether rivals on average do the same things, basically. Now the question, everything in number one is stuff you have complete control over. So you're going to get to see real impacts from what you're doing there. However, number two is something that only the other team has control over. Will you know what the other team is doing? You know, if you find out that someone on your team is giving away information to the other team, you should have a talk with them. I'm going to leave it at that. You guys figure out how that needs to be punished. But you guys need to keep your strategies to yourselves. You will most certainly need to return to the branded footwear production page one or more times to adjust the total number of pairs to be produced and consider how to best allocate production across facilities to minimize overall costs. In other words, this isn't a one and done. By the way, you've got forecasted consumption for 4 regions. And we said that you can meet the need in any region by shipping from another region or producing it in that region. And so now if you're not going to produce it in that region, you've got to figure out where it comes from. That's going to impact the number of shoes you make at the other facility that you're using to make those pairs of shoes. Not only do production costs of branded footwear vary by facility location, but there are also import tariffs, the impacts of shifting exchange rates, and shipping costs to consider in deciding how many branded pairs to produce at each facility and where to ship the output. Can you tell there's going to be a lot of back and forth on this? Production facilities. This decision page involves entries regarding number one, whether to purchase new or refurbished footwear making equipment. Do you need to do that right away? No, we said there's plenty of capacity. You do not need to do that right away. Number two, sell any unneeded footwear making equipment at one or more existing facilities. Sometimes students, they're performing poorly, so their sales are down, and they need cash. So what do? well, hey, we're not using these machines because sales are down, let's sell them. What does that do to your ability to dig yourself out of the hole? That totally screws you up, so don't do that. Number 3, invest in production improvement options at one or more existing facilities. Number 4, build new facilities in Latin America or Europe, Africa. And number 5, construct more space in the North America or Asia Pacific facilities so as to accommodate the installation of additional footwear making equipment in the following year. Do you need to build any new factories? Right now, year 11, do you need to build any new factories? No. You have plenty of capacity. By the way, building a factory is like buying a house. It's really easy to get into, somewhat harder to get out of. Purchasing new or refurbished equipment. So you get this unused space. Companies have the option of installing new equipment at a cost of $5 million per $250,000 pair production capability, or refurbished equipment at a cost of $3.6 million per 250,000 pairs of production capability. What do we say the benefit of new machines is? I think there's a couple of them. New machines produce less. Yeah, rejects, right? And I think they improve worker productivity, is that right? I think they also have a higher production rate. All equipment additions must be in increments of 250,000 pairs. Both types of equipment have a 10-year life. All equipment purchases can be made at the beginning of each year, and equipment suppliers can deliver and install new or refurbished equipment within 24 to 48 hours, thus making it available for full production for the entire year. I'm going to call bullshit on that. It takes weeks and months to install machinery. That's just for the purposes of the simulation. Production facilities can be operated with whatever equipment desired, all new, all refurbished, or any percentage combination of the two. The original 4 million pairs of new equipment in the North America facility was purchased at the beginning of year 5 and will be fully depreciated and scrapped at the beginning of year 15. How many years are we going out to? 18. What does that mean for your ability to produce shoes in year 16, 17, and 18 if you don't do anything about this problem? You can't. And you'll find yourself in year 16 and you'll be in a lot of pain and you won't recognize why. The original 4 million pairs of refurbished equipment in Asia Pacific was purchased at the beginning of year 6 and will likewise be fully depreciated and scrapped at the beginning of year 16. So if you didn't catch it on year 15 and then you don't catch it on year 16, suddenly you're going to have 0 shoes and you won't know why. You may replace the worn out equipment at the beginning of the year if you wish. Okay, new equipment has 3 beneficial operating features not available with refurbished equipment. Number 1, new equipment enables better quality control, thus increasing the SQ ratings of the pairs by 0.5 stars. So there's a benefit. Remember, there are different ways to spend money to improve your SQ rating. That's one of them. Number 2, new equipment operates at higher speeds, such that worker productivity is increased by 500 pairs per year. So there's another benefit. And number 3, the added quality control capabilities of new equipment reduces the reject rates on the pairs produced by 20%. Since these benefits apply only to pairs produced with the new equipment, the size of these 3 benefits is proportional to the percentage of new equipment installed at the facility. If you've got 100% new equipment, you're going to get that full half star, and you're going to get the full productivity improvement and the 20% lower reject rate. And if you're half and half, though, you're only going to get half that benefit. So next we'll talk about selling equipment installed at a company facility. You have the option at the beginning of each year to sell all or part of the footwear production equipment at a facility. I think that's not supposed to be repeated there. All sales are made in increments of 250,000 pairs and occur at the beginning of the year. All sales are made at a price equal to the current book value of the equipment, with the oldest equipment always being sold first. Now, I'm going to call bullshit for the second time today. Whenever you sell equipment, what is the likelihood that you're actually going to get book value out of it?
Pretty low.
It's pretty low. And it could be higher, it could be lower. In the beginning, you'll probably get lower than book value. And then after the machinery is fully appreciated, you'll probably get more than book value. Example, every single machine that I inherited in my little operation in 1997 was completely depreciated out. They all had a book value of 0. Yet the lowliest machine in my cell I could have sold on the open market for $50,000. My best machine I could have sold for $300,000. But the chances of them being sold for exactly their book value, near 0. Production improvement options. Here's some important stuff. You may undertake one production improvement option per year at a given facility with a maximum of 2 production improvement options throughout the life of the facility. So we're going to see that there are 4 options. How many of those can you put on any one plant? 2. Can you do them both in the same year? Nope, the most you can do is 1 per year. The cost of production improvement option is treated as additional investment. The improved equipment that is installed has a 10-year service life and is depreciated on a straight line basis at a rate of 10% annually. Production improvement options take effect the year after they are initiated. We're going to be playing 8 years. Do you guys have to worry about this stuff dying and going away on you? No, you get to keep it the whole time. Production improvement options for a new facility cannot be ordered in the same year that the construction of the new facility is initiated. In other words, you have to build something before you can install one of these things on it. Option A, purchase of special equipment to reduce the current reject rate by 50%. And they tell you how much it costs, $625,000 per 25,000 pairs of installed production equipment. Option B, assembly layout revisions to reduce production run setup costs by 50%. And that's a capital outlay of $400,000. Now, when would option B be especially helpful? What kind of strategy would option B really help you out with?
You're trying to have a large number of different models.
Yeah, if you're trying to have a large number of different models, that setup reduction is key. Option C, purchase of special equipment to increase the SQ rating by 1 star. A capital outlay of $1.2 million per 250,000 pairs of installed production equipment. Now, are there other ways for you to improve your SQ rating? What could we do?
You increase your spending on TQM or Six Sigma.
Okay. What else?
Increase spending on your designs for each model.
Right, so features and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, someone else besides Captain Barentine. What, Mr. Roy, what else can we do to get our SQ star up? What are the 2 kinds of materials we can use?
Superior, regular, or normal.
So superior and standard. So if I wanted to improve my SQ rating, which one of those would I use more? Superior. So I want you guys, and then we talked about new machines is another way to get your SQ rating higher. What you need to do on this option C is look at that price and ask yourself, can I boost that SQ rating some other way more cheaply? And if the answer is yes, then should you be doing option C? No. Option D, purchase of robots to assist assembly and boost worker productivity by 50%. Capital outlay of $3.6 million per 250,000 pairs of installed equipment. Now, how else can we boost worker productivity?
Increase their pay or incentives.
Yeah, so we could use incentive pay. We could do best practices training. There's all sorts of other things. Now, that $3.6 million, that looks pretty pricey to me. But you guys are going to need to figure out whether or not that's worthwhile for you. If I were doing this and I did a large number of models, the first thing I would do would be option B. Because what else do you have here how else can you turn that number down, that setup cost number down? I believe this is the only way. And so if I were going to do this, that would be the first thing I would do. Approximate projections of the annual cost savings for each option of the facility are shown on the page. At each facility, the cost-saving benefits vary quite significantly, not only because of the current operating differences across facilities, and then they go into reject rates, models being produced, and all that, but also because your company's management team may wish to compete differently in different geographic regions, and thus assemble different numbers of models and have different SQ ratings for different regions. Now, these improvements are put on one plant, and so it's going to only impact that one plant. You might have one plant where you were really focused on doing a large number of models. You might want to do option B for it. You might have another situation where you're more concerned about productivity, so maybe you do option D. I don't know, but those are things you need to take into account. Construction of new additional facility space. It is highly likely that your company will need to construct additional facility space in upcoming years. Do you need to do it now? No, in upcoming years. Number one, the construction of all facility space in all regions takes 1 year to complete. Thus, a decision to build a new production facility or expand the space of an existing facility in year one means the space will be available for the installation of footwear production equipment in the beginning of year 12. This is one more where I'm going to call bullshit, because every time I've been involved with the building of a factory, it takes at least 3 years. And I told this to a group of China EMBA students, and they laughed and they said, "Do you know how long it takes to build a factory in China?" And it was like a number of weeks. Now, are you guys familiar with the idea of tofu drag construction? In China, all these buildings are falling down. Just the entire buildings just fall over. Do you know why? Because they're built in a matter of weeks. If you're going to do this right, it's going to take 3 years. The minimum space for a new facility in Europe, Africa, or Latin America, or for expanding space in any existing facility is space sufficient for 1 million pairs. So you can't do anything less than 1 million pairs. And I think it's done in increments of 1 million pairs. The maximum initial size of a new production facility in a region which currently has no production facility is space for 5 million pairs of footwear making equipment. All costs for added facility space must be paid for in the year that the new construction or expansion is initiated. In other words, you've got to have the money up front. Are you going to get the benefit immediately? No, you're going to have to wait a year, right? And so you've got to keep an eye on your cash flow here. By the way, what is more likely to make a company go belly up? A bad strategy or running out of cash? Running out of cash. You can have a company that's otherwise doing great and being profitable, but if they run out of cash, that's what stimulates bankruptcy. So you guys need to keep an eye on your cash, and when you've got money flowing out to build factories and stuff, that consumes cash. Company's board of directors, blah, 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 only up to a worldwide total amount of facility space to accommodate 21 million pairs of foot-making equipment. And then they tell us that total facility space of 21 million pairs is 27.6% greater than the year 20 average total demand per company. And the maximum use of overtime is just over 53% greater than the year 20 average of 16.455 million pairs. So your company is unlikely to need more than 21 million pairs of facility space worldwide, unless, number one, the company managers are confident of the ability to capture an outsized sales volume or market share, or two, company managers, for whatever reasons, decide not to install footwear equipment in some of the existing space in North America, Asia Pacific, and have opted to construct in Europe, Africa, or Latin America, or are short on facility space in certain regions. Let's talk about that number one. Company managers are confident of the ability to capture a market. We have a word for that. Are you guys familiar with the term hubris? Hubris is kind of like arrogance. And so if I were to say, oh yeah, well, here's an example of hubris. Our strategic plan for this university says that we're going to have 30,000 students by the year 2030. How many do we have now? A little over 20,000? What's happened to the demographic that comes here to school? So let me let you in on a little history. We had this thing called the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, that time frame. What do people do during a financial crisis? Do they make a bunch of babies? No. In fact, they kind of hold off on making babies to see if the world's going to fall apart. Then we figured out the world wasn't going to fall apart. But you know what happened? Did people bounce back and start pumping up babies? No. So now we've got this permanent reduction in the number of people. So when are those people going to be hitting this place? Those missing people are here right now. Fall 2025 was the first semester of this demographic bust. And for people to magically think that just because they're charming, witty, or whatever else, that they're going to be able to convince 30,000 people to show up here on campus, that's hubris. Now, I'm not saying our people are any different than any other leaders, because damn near all of them are afflicted by hubris. Because it takes a certain amount of hubris to think that I can be the CEO of a company. I can be the president of a university, right? Because people who aren't afflicted by hubris would prefer just to have the simple life and not mess with that crap. Does that make sense? Kind of like thinking about a surgeon. Does it take a certain amount of arrogance to cut into a human body? Yeah. Does that make them bad people? No. Am I glad they do it? I haven't needed surgery yet, but if I do, I want them around, right? Okay, so I would tell you, if anyone in your group starts talking about, oh yeah, we got to build out a bunch of capacity and we want to go beyond that 21 million, just remind them about hubris. It's probably not going to work out. Okay, let's see. A pop-up warning will appear if a decision entry to construct additional facility space violates any of the above policies. Guys, watch for the warnings. There are going to be warnings on many of the pages. You're going to do something stupid, and it's going to say, hey, that's kind of stupid. Are you sure you want to do that? This is another thing that makes the simulation easier than the real world. Does the real world ever say, man, that's stupid? No. Now, if you're going to borrow money at the bank to do something, your banker may say, man, that's stupid. Maybe you should think about that again. But in the real world, you don't have those, especially from your company systems, don't give you those kinds of warnings. Now we're on to branded distribution and warehouse operations. The branded distribution and warehouse operations entails 5 entries for each region. The first 4 entries at the top of the page involve shipping newly produced pairs from production facilities to the 4 regional distribution warehouses. The decision entry in the warehouse operations section concerns clearance sales of leftover inventory that company managers may or may not want to undertake. First of all, shipping decisions. Every pair produced must be shipped to one of your 4 warehouses. So in other words, you're not going to have any finished goods at a factory. It all has to go somewhere. Note that there is information in the warehouse operations section showing how many pairs and models are in beginning inventory, and further down, the projected buyer demand, the minimum inventory required to achieve the desired delivery time, and the projected inventory surplus or shortfall at the end of a current year. As you enter the pairs to be shipped to each regional warehouse from each facility, the information on the line labeled pairs available for sale in the year will be updated along with the associated number of models and SQ ratings on pairs. Okay, start at the end and think about this. We have demand out here for shoes. It's different in each of the 4 regions. Now, where are those shoes going to come from? They're going to come from those regional distribution centers. Now, the next question is, where do the shoes at the warehouses come from? You have to choose which plant they come from. And so then at those plants, when we make our production decisions, they need to match those shipping numbers. And so all these numbers need to match up all the way through. A lot of times people don't quite get that. Inventory clearance. The discounted price on clearance sales varies according to 1, the number of pairs your company is clearing out, and 2, the total size of leftover inventories in the region. There are entries for the percentage, if any, of unsold pairs from the previous year that you want to clear out. You can enter tentative percentages, check out the margins over direct costs, and the projected inventory surplus or shortfall at the end of the upcoming year. see the last line in the third box, and then decide whether to keep the excess pairs in current inventory or clear some or most out. If you go to buy shoes on clearance, what do you expect to pay for them? Yeah, they're going to be less. That means that if I'm clearing out shoes, what's going to happen to my profit per pair? It's going to go down. You say, well, why the hell would I want to clear them out? Do you remember what happens to the SQ ratings of shoes that we keep more than 1 year?
It's a 0.3 star penalty.
Yeah, 0.3 star penalty. And so these are, once again, it's something you've got to balance out here. I have had students, by the way, what happens if you overestimate demand and you produce a bunch of shoes and then people don't want to buy your shoes? You end up with a whole lot of shoes in inventory. You say, well, not a problem. Let's clear that out. Okay, clear it out. What happens the next year? You need to figure out what's wrong. You need to figure out why your shoes are unappealing. Or you need to figure out that you're just making way too many shoes. But you've got to do something to fix the problem, or what do you think is going to happen the very next year?
Same thing.
Same thing, right? Insanity. One of the definitions of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect different outcomes. If you're doing the same thing over and over again and you haven't fixed the problem, you're going to continue to get that big buildup of inventory. Question so far? Okay, the next one, number 1, talks about that 0.3 penalty, and then number 2 says clearing out inventory at the beginning of the year may help reduce projected inventory surplus of the number of the current year. And so basically your projected ending inventory is your beginning inventory plus production minus sales. And so if you clear out shoes, that lowers that beginning inventory, so it's going to lower that projected surplus of shoes, assuming you've got a surplus. Carrying costs of required inventory entails annual cost of 50 cents a pair. I mean, there's some other things to keep in mind there. Getting rid of excess beginning inventory may prove useful in helping to keep the company's production facilities running at or near full capacity. Why would you want your firm running at or near full capacity? What's the benefit?
Maximum production.
Maximum production, and what does that do to your costs per unit?
Lowers it.
Yeah, so keep in mind your variable cost is going to stay the same no matter how many you produce. However, that fixed cost, which we're dividing out over the number of units of production, goes down, down, down the more we produce. Does that make sense? Okay, now let's talk about, I'll get to it here. So it is usually to be more profitable for your company to sell the leftover pairs at regular retail wholesale prices in the current year, unless the surplus inventory is too large to make this likely. Underline that. So if you've only got a small amount of the surplus inventory, should you be doing clearance sales? No. The purpose of the clearance sales option is to give you a means of disposing of unexpectedly large leftover inventory to avoid the impact of a 0.3 star SQ rating reduction and incurring the storage costs. So don't go overboard on inventory clearance and reduce the projected inventory surplus to near zero, because without a surplus to fill any orders above the projected sales volumes, sales could be lost and buyers may take their business to rival footwear companies. So would I rather have a deficit of 100,000 shoes or a surplus of 100,000? I would rather have a surplus. So when I was in high school, I worked at a grocery store, and I would get there at 6 in the morning, and one of my jobs was to bring in the bread. The bread was baked in Harrison, Arkansas, and it was dropped on the front sidewalk of the store. And I would go out and bring it in and put it on the shelves. And at the same time, there was this guy that would come and fill the newspaper box. Do you guys know these, where you put the coin in and you can open the door and get the newspaper out? Okay, so I would talk to him, and one day he comes and he opens the newspaper box and it's empty. And I said, wow, you must be really happy. He said, no. I said, you sold all your newspapers. He says, but I don't know how many sales more I could have had, right? Because he didn't have the surplus inventory. I said, so what's ideal for you? He says, ideally, I show up and there's precisely one copy of the newspaper left. That way, I'm not wasting my money on newspapers that I have to throw away, but I know that I didn't miss any sales. Does that make sense? And so think of your shoe inventory. You'd always rather like to have the one newspaper left. And so that way, if there is greater than projected sales, you'll be able to capture those sales. Understanding the required minimum inventory amounts, your company is required to keep a certain number of pairs in inventory in each regional warehouse to ensure having sufficient models and sizes on hand to fill online orders and deliver retailer orders within your selected delivery time. What do you think happens to that required inventory when you go from 4 weeks to 1 week?
Increase.
Yeah, it's got to go up, right? It's got to go up, and all the costs that are associated with it are involved there. Correcting a projected inventory shortfall. A projected inventory shortfall in a region represents potential lost sales. Company managers should consider correcting any projected inventory shortfalls by shipping additional pairs to the regions where the shortfalls exist. This could mean returning to the branded production to produce additional pairs at one or more facilities, or reducing the size of any inventory clearances, or reducing your marketing efforts in the region, like raising prices, reducing advertising, which will lower buyer demand. And so people are always thinking about, well, wait a minute, I've got an inventory shortfall. Maybe I've always got to make more, or I've always got to ship them in from somewhere else. What if instead you dialed back on the things that are driving demand? Now, is it what I would recommend? No. But if you find yourself with a production setup that can only produce a fixed number of whatevers, does it make sense to dial back your marketing and whatnot until that demand exactly meets the supply? It does. So my sister-in-law is the goat lady of her little town in Arkansas. She has these goats, and she sells these goats. And so one of her goats had a bunch of kids. That's what you call baby goats. They had a bunch of kids. And then she says, I sold all those goats in 2 days, and I had people calling me for 2 more weeks asking about the goats. I said, do you know how to fix this problem for next time? And she said, no. And she mentioned something about getting more goats, and my brother-in-law said no. Goats can be a pain in the ass. What could she do? Yeah, charge more for the goats. Raise the price. If you're asking $50 a goat, start asking for $100 a goat. By the way, if after you've sold all but one goat for $100 and then you stop getting calls, what can you do? Sell the goat, say, oh, special sale, ugly goat, $50, right? Okay. Relevance of exchange rate cost adjustments. The exchange rate cost adjustments on incoming shipments shown in the bottom section of the page merit your attention. Producing footwear in one geographic region and exporting it for sale in another region entails upward or downward adjustments in the production cost of shipments coming into distribution from a foreign facility. A positive number for a region represents an adverse exchange rate adjustment. What does adverse mean? Is that good? No, that's bad. That has the effect of raising the per pair cost of incoming footwear shipments, which can impair profit margins on sales in that region. A negative number for a region is a favorable change in the exchange rates that effectively lowers the per pair cost of incoming shipments, which can increase profitability of sales in that region. It is important to understand that anytime there are large per pair cost adjustments, you should experiment with different cross-region shipping patterns to minimize the cost effects of unfavorable adjustments and maximize the cost effects of favorable adjustments. I have had teams in their presentations say that this was the one thing that they did better than all of their competitors, and they won. Now, am I saying that that's true for you? No. I am saying, though, it's important to pay attention to this and to manage accordingly. Distribution and warehouse expenses. Freight costs for incoming shipments of newly produced footwear from a facility to a warehouse in the same region currently runs $1 per pair. If you're going to a different region, it's $2 per pair, subject to change in upcoming years. I will not be changing those, but the simulation might. Any tariffs on pairs imported are due and payable at the port of entry rather than when the orders are filled. What does that mean? If you ship a bunch of shoes into a region and then you can't sell them, you still have to pay the tariff? Absolutely. In addition to the inventory costs of carrying unsold pairs over from the prior year, other warehouse expenses include boxing and shipping fees for orders sent to footwear retailers, order processing, boxing, packaging, handling, and shipping fees of $12.50 per pair shipped to online customers, and annual leasing and maintenance fees of $1 million per warehouse. However, when the warehouse volume is less than 200,000 pairs annually, leasing fees are 5 times the number of annual pairs available for sale. Should the company abandon selling footwear in a geographic region, leasing and maintenance costs in that region will fall to 0. You can pull totally out of a region. Does it ever make sense to totally pull out of a region?
Good.
Yeah, it can. It can. So let's say the exchange rates were totally messing you over. You couldn't produce in that region because of high labor. I mean, there are all sorts of things that might make something you say, you know what, never mind. Example, Target pulled out of Canada. Google pulled out of China. So there are business cases where it's okay to pull out of a region, especially if you're losing money there. 3 decision entries, this is internet marketing, 3 decision entries in each region are required to complete your competitive effort to market branded pairs to online buyers, the retail price at which you wish to sell to online buyers, expenditures for search engine advertising, and whether online buyers will pay for shipping $12.50 per pair or get free shipping. Retail price, search engine advertising, and free shipping decision entries will instantly produce updated projections of the total branded production needed in the year on the branded footwear production page. The new projection is likely to require revisions in the number of branded pairs which will need to be produced in one or more facilities, and also revised shipping entries on the branded distribution page. So as you're messing with these decisions, it's going to impact the decisions that you might have already talked about. So you got to go back and look at those again. The maximum price allowed for shoes sold online is $200 per pair. In the unlikely event that you and your co-managers wish to abandon internet sales of athletic footwear, you simply enter 0 for the region's retail price. A 0 price entry is interpreted as your decision not to offer any branded pairs for sale at the company's regional website. Now, notice it says, in the unlikely event. Are they encouraging you to abandon the internet market? No. Should you abandon the internet market? No. Which is actually growing faster, the internet market or the retail? It's the internet market, right? It's important to avoid setting such a low internet price that you put your company in direct competition with retailers who stock your company's brand. This could pose channel conflict. Footwear retailers view your website price as a direct competitive threat to their business whenever it is less than 40% above the wholesale price you charge them. So, example, if your wholesale price to retailers is $50, then your company's internet price should be $70 or higher to avoid unduly squeezing the markups that retailers can charge. Now, I have actually had students, first of all, they're doing this and they don't realize it. And their retailers are fleeing, and they don't know why. If you find yourself in a situation where your retailers are fleeing you, first thing you want to do is make sure that you're not producing this channel conflict. So I had some students that came to me, and their internet sales were in the toilet, or their footwear sales were in the toilet, and they said, "Why have the shoe stores abandoned us?" And I said, "It's because of your internet price." And they said, "Well, we kept it at least $20 above their price." And I said, "Well, wait a minute." I said, "Where did you get $20? And they said, "Well, that example." I was like, yeah, that's an example. If your price to the footwear retailers is 100, your internet price better be how much? 140 or higher. And instead they were at like 121. I'm like, dollars and percents aren't necessarily the same. Most common mistake I see people make. The more that your internet price falls under the 40% benchmark, the bigger the percentage of footwear retailers who will elect not to even stock your company's brand next year at all. And so you can totally run off your footwear retailers. Free shipping is very appealing to online buyers, but it also has a big cost impact, probably requiring an upward adjustment in the internet price to cover some or all of the $12.50 per pair shipping fee. So if you totally raise the price to cover the shipping fee, probably doesn't really get you any boost, especially if other people are doing something, pricing somewhat less than that. And so you need to keep an eye on that. The calculations on the page for the internet revenues, costs, operating profits, and operating profit margins allow you to weigh the pros and cons of free shipping. In other words, play around with the numbers. Do you guys know what the what-if machine is? The spreadsheet is a what-if machine. I can change the entries and see how it impacts everything. The game is basically a what-if machine. You're throwing in these numbers, play around with them to maximize your outcomes. Shipments to online buyers are always made from the distribution warehouse serving the buyer's geographic region. Base operating costs for each of the company's regional websites are $350,000 annually, plus $4,000 in website expenses incurred for each model displayed. In other words, the more models you have, the more you're going to be spending. These costs appear as a marketing expense in the revenue cost operating profit projections for internet operations that appear on the page. The shipping handling costs of $12.50 on each pair shipped to online customers in each region are considered as a warehouse expense, since these costs are incurred in the distribution warehouses. Now let's get back to the number of models. Do you think it might be wise to offer fewer models on the internet than you do to the footwear retailers? It might be, because you're spending $4,000 per model there. So maybe even though we're offering 300 to the footwear retailers, maybe we only offer 100 online. That's something you guys have got to figure out for yourselves. Exchange rate adjustments. If the sizes of the exchange rate adjustments are large, you may be able to increase overall company profitability by trimming marketing and competitive efforts in regions where the revenue adjustments are highly unfavorable, and significantly increasing marketing and competitive efforts in regions where the revenue adjustments are highly favorable. Now, this is, you can think about this similarly to like the tariff thing. Right now, does it make sense for Mercedes-Benz to be using a lot of advertising money in the U.S.? Why not? Yeah, the cars are more expensive, especially not the ones made in Alabama, but the ones that are made in Germany are coming in with like a 25% tariff on them. Do you think they're going to be able to sell as many? No. Would it make sense for them to continue pouring a bunch of marketing money into that kind of a situation? No. So my prediction is you're going to see fewer advertisements from BMW, Mercedes, going, at least until this tariff thing gets worked out. The competitive assumptions section at the bottom of the page. The first time you visit this page, the entries in this section show the prior year regional average retail price, the expenditure for search engine advertising, and free shipping offers. Projections of your company's wholesale volumes, market shares, revenues, costs, and operating profits for the upcoming year will be based on how your company's upcoming year regional competitive efforts in the internet segment compared to last year's regional average competitive efforts of rivals in the internet segment, rather than their forthcoming efforts. Using last year's competitive efforts to calculate the projections is likely to render them inaccurate by anywhere from a little to a lot. Why? Why do we expect things to be different next year than they were this year? Is your team going to stay put if things are going badly? No, what are you going to do? Yeah, you're gonna make some changes. And guess what? Your competitor is too. And so if you make the assumption that they're just going to stay put, then that means that your projections are going to be wrong because it's basing everything it's projecting based on your competitors' last year decisions. Before you finalize your internet marketing decision entries, it makes sense to first enter updates of the industry averages for the 3 factors in the competitive assumptions section. Yes, you will likely be making estimations, approximations, but sales market share projections based on carefully reasoned assumptions of what rivals on average are likely to do should prove more accurate than projections based on regional average competitive efforts of rivals a year ago. If your rival was doing 4 stars and now they've moved up to 5 stars, what might we assume they would do next year?
Move up again.
Yeah, they're either going to be 5 stars or they're going to move up again. I don't think they're going to be dropping back. And so maybe you throw 5.5 stars in there. Who knows? I'm going to teach you a new term today. The swag. You guys know what a swag is? It's a scientific wild ass guess. Now, wild ass, like a donkey. So a wild ass guess, it probably has about as much information in it as the guess of a wild donkey. However, a scientific wild guess is one that you've put your knowledge in, and it's more like what we would call an expected value. Hopefully you guys have had enough math at this point to know about how we calculate expected values. Now, is this what's going to happen? No. It's our very best guess of what's going to happen. And so you can look at what your competitors are doing, you can look at the trends and the decisions they've been making, and then you can make adjustments in what you think they're going to be doing in the coming year. Now, would it make sense after things roll for you to compare your predictions of what they were going to do versus what actually happened? Yeah, that's how we figure out where we need to improve our prediction ability. It's like, wow, we really sucked on that. What can we do differently that'll make things better next time? Even if you happen to overestimate the strength of your competition from rivals in the upcoming year and end up with bigger sales market shares than were projected, your company will be able to fill the unexpected demand, provided you have sufficient surplus inventory of branded pairs to fill the unexpected order. So there's another reason for you to have enough shoes on hand, is just in case you have overestimated your competitors and you end up selling more shoes than you thought you would. That's better than having the unpleasant surprise of selling less than the projected sales volume because you underestimated the strength of the competitive efforts from rivals. Trying different decision entries enables you to compare the different projected outcomes of employing different levels of competitive effort in each region and thus zero in on a combination of strategic actions that seem to be the best way to counter probable changes in the competitive efforts of rivals in the internet segment. If you, I've told you it's okay to use AI, and here's one of the ways that I would tell you you might want to use AI. Take those competitive intelligence reports and feed last year, not just last year, but all of them, and then ask for trends in your competitors' behavior. And ask it to identify and basically make projections of where they're going to go next. Now, would I just use one AI model for that? No. AI models are like advice. You should have a diversified portfolio. Sometimes students will come to me and they'll ask for advice on something and I'll tell them what I think and they're like, okay, I'll go do that. And I'm like, no! You should ask like 5 other people. And if we're all telling you the same thing, then what can you assume about that information? It's probably right. Or it's at least the best guess we've got, right? It's a good swag. Okay, now we're on to wholesale marketing. As you experiment with different decision entries, keep in mind the following. how your company's wholesale price of branded footwear in a given region compares to the upcoming year's regional average wholesale price will have a major bearing on your company's branded sales and market shares in the region. Remember, we said that was one of the three most important things, right? Price. What were the other two?
Stores.
Yep, SQ rating. Go back and look at what the third one is. I told you guys yesterday to underline that. Lower wholesale prices tend to increase sales of your company's footwear. Assuming other competitive effort factors are not reduced, lower prices can narrow operating profit margins and lead to a decline in operating profit for a region because the gain in revenue attributable to the higher unit volume is insufficient to overcome the revenue erosion associated with the lower price. As you lower the price, so revenue is the number of shoes times the price per shoe. So as you lower the number of shoes, unless it's producing a proportional or more than proportional increase in the number of pairs sold, you're actually going to reduce revenue. So you need to watch that. If your company's brand advertising exceeds the upcoming year's all-company regional average, then your company will enjoy a competitive advantage over rivals in advertising in that region. Spending an above-average amount for retailer support compared to rivals not only helps to enhance footwear sales per retail outlet, but also has a positive effect on the number of retail outlets willing to merchandise your company's brand of footwear. Should you skimp on retailer support? I know you guys are tempted because you're finance people, but don't do it. Footwear retailers consider 4-week delivery times satisfactory. However, shorter delivery times help retailers sell more pairs and will make some retailers more willing to carry your brand. And so that's another way you can boost the number of retailers carrying your stuff, is to give them faster delivery. However, you can see that the cost per pair, it gets pretty, so 4-week delivery costs 25 cents per pair, but if you go for 1 week, it's $3 per pair. You can see things really jump. It triples from 4 weeks down to 3 weeks. It doubles from 3 weeks to 2 weeks, and then it doubles again from 2 weeks to 1 week. Offering mail-in rebates as little as $3 per pair in mail-in rebates to as much as $15 per pair. All rebate offers must be in round dollars, so you can't offer a mail-in rebate of $14.79. Now, buyer failure to redeem the rebate means that the per pair cost of a rebate is below the face value of the coupon as shown in the following table. If you offer a $3 rebate, only 15% of the people will redeem that. And so your expected cost per pair is going to be that 15% times $3, which is just 45 cents. Then as you go up, notice that the redemption rate increases. Why is that?
More incentive.
Yeah. So think about someone who has a high value of their time. I consider myself someone who has a high value of their time. When I get a $3 rebate offer, what do you think I do with it?
Trash.
I trash it. And it also, do you think it impacts my buying decision? No. One of the things you'll see stupid people do is buy based on a rebate and then not send it in. And so you actually can get a benefit from offering a rebate even when the people don't use it because for some reason in the moment it makes them feel warm and fuzzy. By the time we get to $15, hell, that's even worth my time, right? So that's 90% times 15 is $13.50 per pair sold. Would I tell you to go whole hog and do $15 rebate? Probably not. Is this something you can do if no one else in a region is doing mail-in rebates? Give it a try. Because remember, it's all about your average effort versus, or your effort versus the industry average. And so if the other team in this case isn't doing it, give it a try, see what it does. There is nothing you can do to immediately secure additional retailers, but are there things we can do that will immediately piss off retailers? Yeah, remember that cross-channel conflict where we had our internet price too high? That's one way to piss them off. What about cutting their retailer support? That's another way to piss them off. And you can do that immediately. But when you go to build it back, Is you going to be able to build it back immediately? No. Do not anger your retailers. Expect the buildup of retailers willing to handle your brand to occur over a period of several years. Several, that to me means somewhere like 5 to 7. How many years are we playing this thing? 8. Should you make your retailers mad, where you have to try to earn back their love? Absolutely not. Likewise, there's nothing you can do to immediately change the celebrity appeal indices of your company, appeal indices, or your company's image rating and or reputation. Those are things that you have to build over time. And we said that there were basically 3 things that went into that image rating, 2 of which provide benefits otherwise, and 1 of which doesn't provide benefits in any other arena. So I would tell you to hit the 2 and not the other one. The 7 competitive assumption entries at the bottom of the page. The first time you visit this page, the entries in the section show the prior year regional averages of these competitive factors. Unless and until you update these regional averages to take account for the competitive effort adjustments of rivals on average may make in the coming year, then all of the on-page projections of your company's wholesale volumes, market shares, all that stuff will compare to your rivals from last year, not from what you think they're going to do this year. So they could be way off. We've already hit that. It's likely that rival brands will, on average, alter aspects of their competitive effort in the wholesale segment in all 4 regions in the current year. You are well advised to update the 7 competitive assumptions to account for whatever change in regional averages you anticipate are likely to occur. You should make these updates before you finalize your entries for the 5 wholesale marketing decisions at the top of the page. So go ahead and put in what you think your competitor is going to do, and hopefully that will give you a better outcome than just letting it roll. Bear in mind that if you overestimate the strength of competition from rivals in the wholesale segment in the coming year and end up with bigger sales market than you were projected, your company will still be able to fill. Okay, so we've already read that for another thing, right? Consider taking the time to experiment with different wholesale marketing decisions and decision entries, and perhaps different likely case and worst case changes in regional averages. Such experimentation enables your company's management team to more wisely decide what strategic actions to take to try to counter competitive efforts of rivals in the wholesale segment of the branded footwear market. If your company appears competitively disadvantaged on these 3 competitive factors, then your company's management team should consider trying to overcome this disadvantage versus rivals by exerting greater effort on the remaining 7 competitive factors. Remember, there was a list of, there was the top tier, that was the 3, and then there was the next tier down in importance, and that's the 7. And if you do enough on the 7, maybe you can somewhat overcome these problems you've got on the 3. Now the next part is private label operations, and I think we will wait until next time to talk about that. So for next time, we're going to finish this up, and we're going to start chapter 14. So bring your slides with you for chapter 14. Go ahead and read chapter 14. And if someone would please get out their computer right now and log in and see if the BSG Quiz 1 is showing, I would sure appreciate that.